Hey Jake, hey Mo, how's it going?
Hey
Hey,
Kirah, hey Mo.
hey.
My friends, so excited to have you here. Finally, I've been wanting to do this episode for forever. So I'm so happy we were able to squeeze this in since everything's busy nowadays. Maybe it's this
Right.
Kazemi situation, but
Yeah, I think it's also just everything like doing its last
opening.
minute run through Aries.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, anyway, welcome both to the show. This is both of your first times on the show. We'll get into how we know each other and all that, but both of you have done work actually for Fresh Voices in astrology around the lots. So I was just like, you're both perfect to talk to about this. And we also just have been talking pretty consistently, the three of us, for like the past almost 3 years,
yeah,
which
God,
is
it's
wild somehow.
yeah.
it's
Does
really
not feel that
wild.
long, but yeah, it's been at least 2.5 years of us just like chatting astro on Twitter for a while. So um hopefully next year we'll get to meet in person finally.
Yes.
But for
hmm
Yes.
now, it's been fun. You guys are two like very smart younger astro. I'm not calling you young, but we're all kind of in the younger cohort. Mo is
Right.
a Gen Zer, so you are one of those Zoomers.
Not a Zoomer. I'm like barely
Barely
a
a Zoomer,
millennial.
but yeah. Oh wait, are you? I thought you had Pluto and Sag.
No, Scorpio.
Okay, never mind. Sorry. I'm sorry for. I
I'm like,
apologize. It's because
no,
you're born that year
it's
when
that
it
95
switches.
year.
Yeah.
Those Pluto Sages are different.
Yeah. It's true. It's true that okay, sorry. All millennial here. My bad. Okay. But
It's okay.
I'm going to have you guys introduce yourself. I have people share their SMR if you're comfortable with it, and tell us a little bit about your practice and sort of how you use Astro. Jake, why don't you start?
Yeah. So my sun, moon, and rising are Capricorn, Cancer, and Capricorn. So I have a rising sun in Capricorn with a full moon in Cancer. And as far as my practice, I got into astrology around like 2018. And that was also the same time that I was going to school for social work at an HBCU. And that's kind of like informed a lot of my practice. Like, so in school, like I learned how to consult with people. I learned how to like, talk about their problems, how to, kind of like approach sensitive topics ethically, like having ethical boundaries, like all that stuff. So, like that's kind of my approach. It's also, I feel like social work is kind of like practical psychology. Like it's a little bit more concerned like with your environment and like the other things that are going on besides like just what's in your head. So I feel like I kind of like bring that to my astrology in the way that I, like look at different parts of your life to kind of like see how they all kind of like come together. Like if you have a problem at work, like it's gonna create problems at home. Like that's like aspects, like it's a whole thing. So yeah, I'm also the treasurer for Aya. And
Aya is
I
the Association for Young
right.
Astrologers, for anyone who
Yes.
doesn't know, who isn't in our
Yes.
astro bubble.
Yeah, I'm bad about that. Yeah, so treasure for Aya, and I also have mainly been focusing on working with the lots. So they used to be like a really prominent technique. We'll get into that. But they aren't really used as much now, or they're used in like more specific kind of like derivative ways. So I'm kind of like focusing on trying to bring them back. There's also like not a lot of information on them out there. So trying to work on getting all that together.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. And you did a talk for Fresh Voices in Astrology like a month or two ago
Mhm.
about the lots. What was it called?
That's a good question, but it
I
was on the
forgot.
hermetic lots.
Yeah.
I knew what it was about. I knew what it was about.
Yeah.
So
No, it was great. And if anyone is looking for like a good intro outside of this, a little bit more like structured, webinar style, it's available for purchase at freshvoicesinastrology.com. So it was really good one.
thank
Um,
you.
yeah. And you didn't say your full name, but Jake Green,
Oh
everybody.
yeah, yeah, Jake Green. See, Mercury and Sag in the
I
12th
mean,
house, by the way.
I just did. We're
So
recording this a couple like 3 hours before a Mercury Kazemi in Aries, and I just did a bunch of solar work. And I'm wearing my Mercury, like I have some Mercury Kazemi oil on, wearing my Mercury talisman. So I'm like tuned in right now to the details.
at least somebody's on it.
Thanks, Jake. How about you, Mel? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Mo. I cannot shut up about my chart. It's okay. I am a Taurus Sun, Pisces rising, like literally same degree as Kirah, and a Sag Moon. So my approach to Astro is pretty traditional all over the board. I don't think I'm just an exclusively Hellenistic astrologer, but like I'm not really like a medieval astrologer either. Like
I
I'm
consider you a
also
medieval astrologer personally.
why?
Because like you just are like a medieval sort of like Persian Astro stan and
That's
like in my
true.
book.
That's true.
I
Okay, you're
love that
right.
about you.
You caught me. Yeah, and no, I think I really like how that part of the tradition has like expanded more upon lots. But I feel like there was a lot that the Hellenists used to do with lots that are really underrated. So whereas Jake is into like just thinking about the lots in terms of like where they fall in your chart, where the ruler is in your chart, and etc., which is a hugely rich practice that I think needs to come back. I am also someone who's into fortune houses because it's just a different way of looking at your chart. And it's one of the things that'll help people actually understand zodiacal releasing better and why certain periods have the qualities that they do.
Mhm.
I don't offer zodiacal releasing as a service yet, just because I'm trying to do more with fortune houses and seeing how that works first before I think about releasing lots. That's just me. But yeah, like I am into all astrology that's old. I'm
Saturn
trying
in
to
the
learn Vedic as
first.
well.
Cough, cough.
Like so yeah. Oh, I forgot to say my full name. Mo Olufemi, but I like being semi-anonymous. So
I
if
mean,
that
do you want us to bleep it out?
nah. Don't bleep it out.
Okay. I love your
So,
last name too. It's like fun to say.
thank you.
It rolls off the
Um
tongue.
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So um yeah, I consider like to me when I think about like your type of astrology, it is very old. I feel like the Saturn in you, like which is very loud.
Mhm.
Saturn and Jupiter really are both pretty loud. Um, and yeah, I love that about you. I love how, you know, you really sink into the text. And I guess I forgot to preface this. Maybe I'll say it in the intro, which I haven't recorded yet, but
Mhm.
we will be sort of getting into more advanced techniques in this episode. We're not doing basics like, you know, the planets and, and houses with this one. We are getting a little bit more advanced, but we're going to do our best to sort of explain as we go. I personally don't know much at all about the lots around besides like what I've learned from both of their Fresh Voices webinars, which I didn't mention. Mo also did a webinar for Fresh Voices, I believe in December 2020.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was about what is it called? The place of
Acquisition.
acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
which is the house that is 11th from fortune. Great webinar, another great one. And again, that's available for purchase at freshvoicesandastrology.com if you're interested in learning more about that. But yeah, you just like these old techniques that, you know, we're still kind of it's not like they're being uncovered, but they haven't really had a resurgence since ancient times, really. You know, like people have used them, I'm sure, especially the people who translating this work, but in terms of making them more popular and widely used amongst astrologers, that has not happened. And so it sounds like you guys are sort of at that precipice of like, making this information more popular, which is pretty cool because there's just so much you can do with astrology. It's like infinite, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. And so the way we all know each other, Twitter, right?
Right, of course.
I feel like the three of us have been in like a Twitter group chat together for about 2.5 years, at least 2 years at this point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like 3-ish.
Yeah.
Literally.
It's been fun.
It has.
I feel like we learn so much from each other in those group chats because we're just constantly sharing ideas, and it's like a safe place to share that stuff too. Instead of just tweeting it to the world.
Not even just like ideas about like astrology, but also just like the business side of like running a practice and like what we should do, or like, how we can like engage with our clients better. It's been really helpful.
Mostly me yelling at you to start doing one-on-one.
I finally started doing that.
And it's been good?
It's been great. Oh my goodness. Like,
I'm so happy. So Mo was just doing written. Mo was just writing her readings, like writing them out. And for the past 2 years, I've been like, you got to stop doing that. Just talk to people. You're good at it. And I'm happy that you're finally there because people deserve it. People need to see you or hear you at least. And it's just easier on you. I don't know how the hell you did that.
So much easier to just talk. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
I still have more to finish typing.
No way. God. Can you just tell them that you'll do it in a voice console?
I'm contemplating doing that.
You should, honestly. Cool.
Yeah.
You guys ready to get into it? Should we start talking?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So the lots, what are they? What the hell are we talking about here?
Can I just share what the lots are not?
Sure.
Can we start there?
Let's start there, Saturn. Why not?
Okay, so this was back before I discovered traditional astrology. And I was still like into, all the like modern whatever. And when I was getting back into astrology as an adult, not as like, a teenager, just like scrolling through Tumblr shit posts, I was like, okay, I want to know when I'm going to get rich, when I'm going to get married, and possibly when I'm going to die. That was just my approach. Okay, I wanted to know it.
I feel you. Third house, ninth house shit.
And like I would stumble upon these posts from like, I can't remember the website, but it's one of those websites that claims to want to empiricize astrology. And they would talk about like looking for like aspects to the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit when it comes to like, either days you're going to get married, the types of people you're going to get married to. It was really strange. Like this was like, mind you, this is like 2017. Okay. Like I had no idea. And I was just like, okay, a lot of spirit, a lot of fortune. What is that? And I remember Googling it, and I would just get, I guess people who took like Dane Rudyard's interpretation of the lot of fortune and kind of ran with it. And was like, this is where you're going to be lucky. And this is where like, and then I was like, okay, great. I see that I have my lot of fortune in I was still using quadrant houses, 6th house. I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't feel lucky at work at all. And then even when I switched to whole signs and I was still like using that interpretation, it was like, lucky in relationships? Don't think so. I don't think that's what that's about. And it wasn't until I started engaging with like Hellenistic astrology deeply in like 2018, 2019. 2019 was when I really started getting into the lots more, but more so from like a zodiacal releasing standpoint, because I like running before I can walk. It was just like, okay, having to divorce the lot of fortune from the concept of like good luck, goodwill, and all that other stuff. Like really helped me understand the lot and what it does better. Like, what about you, Jake? How did you encounter
Yeah.
the lots?
So I kind of got into them because like everybody was all like zodiacal releasing, like ZR, ZR, ZR. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like I, like watched the astrology podcast episode, the 4 hour long episode. Like I figured out how to
Lesson.
do it. And I was just like, okay, but like what are these lots? And like, when you just like generate like a birth chart on astro.com, like using the default settings, like it pulls up the lot of fortune and like it puts it there in your chart with a symbol. And people kind of like talked about the lot of fortune the same that they do the nodes, in the sense that like they don't really know what to do with them. Like they've just heard like some buzzwords and like they hear the name and they're like, fortune's good, like
Right.
I would like a fortune, like, and then they just kind of, which it's not completely wrong, because like the lot of fortune can and like does relate to kind of like your circumstantial like wealth, but like just in terms of like you being lucky. And like I've even heard some like really famous people who should not have been repeating this, like just saying like, oh, somebody's got the lot of fortune in their first house, so they are fortunate. Like that's not how that
No,
works.
that's not how it works.
It was Demetra, like.
Don't out my queen like
I
that.
love
Okay.
her. I love her. I love her so much. I love her so much, but it hurt my heart. It hurt. It hurt.
Can I just say, real quick, we mentioned zodiacal releasing a couple times, and it's kind of impossible to like fully explain it, but just for folks who don't know, zodiacal releasing is an ancient timing technique that has been revived since, in the past, I don't know, a couple decades, um, since all of this material keeps being, translated. And it's basically this timing technique that we use to sort of look at sort of chapters of your life, like longer term periods, and you kind of can break those longer term periods up into shorter periods. And really what we're looking for is peaks of energy or peak of activity related to a certain part of your life. So whether that be, releasing from fortune, looking at your circumstantial, I don't know, would you say wealth maybe, but like your
Your body
circumstantial,
too. Your
your
body
body,
Your body
too.
yeah,
too,
Yeah.
kind of like
yeah.
stuff that happens to you. It's almost like fated stuff that happens to you. Um, that often affects your body. So it's often we're looking at that for health stuff. But then also, releasing from spirit, we'll tend to look at stuff like reputation, career, what you're doing with your life, which is that's what I'm always looking at when I'm doing ZR. You can do zodiacal releasing from the part of Eros, which is which is about love and relationships. So that can show peaks of activity in your love life or your relationships. So yeah, zodiacal releasing is just this cool technique. It's pretty cool. But its sort of basis is in the lots. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yes,
Good,
yes,
good.
100%. Yeah, I mean, even with we'll probably talk about this later in the episode, but even with releasing from spirit, I'm starting to appreciate the mind-body dichotomy with solar and lunar principles, because spirit is thought to be a solar lot, whereas fortune is thought to be a lunar lot. And even just like, it doesn't even have to be career necessarily. Like, I'm starting to realize that when I look at my own zodiacal releasing, because I track it just so I can like figure out, okay, what the hell is going on and how do I use this technique. And I've noticed that like even just decisions I make that are big within like a certain narrative within a certain time frame, like seem to be showing up, whether they're related to my career or not. They usually are related to my career, but like I'm finding that a lot of times, even just like, okay, me deciding to not do something or to do something. Like, I remember there was this whole ZR L3 arc where it was all about me deciding how to file my taxes. Like, and and it was just that. And I was like, that's really weird. Like I was mapping out the L4s, and it's like, I did this, I did that, I got this payment, I got that payment, I made this payment. So like it was just really strange. And it's those moments when you're like, okay, I need to walk away from this. This is too much.
It gets really deep.
It's really deep.
But yeah, zodiacal releasing, I'll just say for folks who are interested in learning more, I would love to do an episode about it one day, and I plan to, maybe not in this season, but sometime this year probably. But if you're interested in learning more, Chris Brennan's the Astrology podcast has a literally 4-hour episode on it, which is like a really great intro lesson. And I would watch it on YouTube so you can see the visuals with it. But yeah, that's always where I'll point people to start learning zodiacal releasing. It's a cool technique. You can learn a lot. Yeah, it took me a while to sort of like totally understand it and get into it. Not to say that I'm like an expert by any means, but just tracking it for myself, and it's like, oh wow, okay, yeah, this shit tracks. Shit tracks. I just started a level 2 peak period, 10th from fortune, and I was on Good Morning America. It's like, and I was on, I was on peaks in like all like 2, 3, and 4.
Wow.
With that. So yeah, it's like, okay, this shit works. It's pretty cool to track. And a lot of you are probably listening to this and like, what the fuck are they talking about? L2, 4, peak, yeah, all that. Sorry for that, the Astro speak. But yeah, it's a cool technique, and it's easy to nerd out about with folks. But getting back to it, okay, so what are the lots?
Right.
Do you want to take that, Jake?
Yeah. So the lots are basically these calculated points. This started out as like a Hellenistic technique. So the earliest kind of like reference to the lots that we have is from this text that we don't have anymore. We just have reference to it, which is called the Panaretos, which it is supposedly written by Hermes, like this mythical figure. We don't like, maybe it was Hermes, like who knows.
The god.
Yeah, exactly. So we have references to that book, which is kind of like it came out like around the same time as the whole idea of like sect was developed too. So I'm not entirely sure like if this was in the same book. But the idea is that like in the Panaretos, they had these 7 lots of the planets. So these, with the Panaretos being written by Hermes, they became known as the Hermetic lots because like they were the lots of Hermes. So each of these 7 lots are related to the planets, and they kind of like rule over different things. So then from that book and from, Hermes putting these original lots together, then people kind of like reverse engineered the calculations. Because, like if you, which we're going to talk about, but you look at the formulas, like you can kind of like tell the idea that they were going for. So then, other astrologers made their own lots, and then that kind of developed, it grew. So this was originally Hellenistic with the lots, and then that then spread to the Arabic astrologers, and they would then call them parts. So the Hellenistic lots and the Arabic parts are the same things. They're just kind of like spread around, but then the Arabic astrologers kind of like developed them further, and they created a ton of them. Like there are literally hundreds of lot calculations, all for like different things. There are obviously like the Hermetic lots, which are kind of like more major. But then, like we have lots for, like marriage, home, death,
Children,
like enemies.
first
Yeah,
child.
children. Yeah.
All the
When to
things.
sell your crops. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Farming, agriculture. Yeah.
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 That's so
So,
cool.
right. So we have like all of these that are like from these calculated points from these lots, which I like to kind of use the topic of like the father as an example. So like if you had a client that came to you and they were like, I want to talk about my dad, like I want to talk about my father, Most people are going to have like a few options. They could, either talk about the sun, like look at the sun for the father. They might look at Saturn. They might look at the fourth house. But so like there's kind of like several potential options. So in that case, like which one are you going to use? Well, if you use the lot of the father, that is taken from the degree of the sun to the degree of Saturn, which is then projected from the ascendant to find this lot. So you're kind of like combining the sun and Saturn, which, most people would think of, using both. Or like having both as an option. Like using the lot would allow you to combine it, so it's got a practical use too, and it also helps to find things that don't have like a house or like a planet that rules them specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Like theft, like like what.
I just
So
wanted to
yeah.
pull up I just put up the chart of the moment just to show folks what these look like in the chart. So usually when you pull up your chart online or something, sometimes they'll have at least the part of fortune. Sometimes they'll have the part of spirit there too. But just so you know, you're not going to find, I don't think, any online calculator that like gives you the lot of father in your birth chart, or like, I don't think that exists yet. You sort of have to find lot calculators, and we'll tell you a couple ways to do that. But I just wanted to show you the two most, I would say, like popular or most well-known lots. The first would be the lot of fortune. And if you are watching the video version, I have this up on my screen. It's like a circle with an X in the middle of it. And that's the lot of fortune. And then for the lot of spirit, it's the circle with a vertical line running straight through it. And that's the symbol for the lot of spirit. And so, yeah, those will show up. And basically, what Jake's talking about is the lots are these mathematical calculations of points on this chart on the 360-degree wheel. So they aren't actual things in the sky or anything. They're mathematical points in the sky, and they're derived from calculations based on points in the chart, like the ascendant, and then certain planets in the chart, sometimes even like house cusps, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Or
yeah.
other lots too.
Yeah, other lots too.
Right. Yeah, or other lots, right? So for very basic example, for the lot of fortune here, a lot of fortune calculation is what for a day chart is
from the sun to the moon.
From the sun to the moon, projected from the ascendant. Okay.
Yes.
So what we're looking at here, the calculation is sun to moon minus ascendendant, right? Or from the ascendant.
For like for the like plus and minus
so confusing
formula, like it reverses it.
Okay.
So yeah, I just remember like in my head, like when it does like the math symbols to reverse it. But like the easiest way to explain to people is just like from the
One
degree of
planet
the
to another.
sun, yeah, to the degree of the moon, which you're going in zodiacal order too. So, whatever distance that happens to be, like even if you have to go like the long way around the chart, like that's whatever.
Right. And so, yeah, I'm looking at my screen here. The sun is currently at 29 degrees, 7 minutes of Aries. The moon is at 13 degrees and 49 minutes of Cancer. And so we literally count how many degrees away does it take to get from the sun to the moon. And then we take that number and we go to the ascendant of the chart, which in this chart is 14 degrees, 59 minutes of Virgo. And we take that that number that we got from the distance from the sun and the moon, and we project that from the ascendant, moving again in zodiacal order, which means the order of the signs, from Aries to Taurus to Gemini, etc. And in this chart, that puts the part of fortune at 29 degrees, 41 minutes of Scorpio. So that's just the calculation for one lot. We have calculations for all, hundreds of calculations for different lots. But I just wanted to sort of further explain that. So these calculations.
I wanted to say that the lots are really cool because, as Jake was mentioning before, if you don't have like a clear signification for a topic, or there are way too many significators for like a particular topic, and it's hard to tell people, okay, like Saturn can be your father, but also Sun, and so it's like, let's get around this by coming up with this formula that will merge the two, sort of, and then project them from some other relevant point. And wherever the sign is says something about the nature of your experience with that. Where the actual lot falls in your natal chart, like we'll bring like house topics, or like, you can also consider the angularity of the lot to show you how like busy that is in your life, or how much like attention you pay towards that thing in your life. And then like, seeing the condition of the ruler, and that can also say things about your experience with the topic. And I think something important to talk about is like which planets are actually chosen says a lot about the cultural assumptions of how that topic is perceived. And
in
so
the time
like,
that it was, in the time that those
in the time that it
calculations were
was
made,
yeah, exactly.
aka ancient times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, the thought lot.
Yes.
I
Okay.
remember that. Yes,
So,
that was great.
yeah. So for Drunk Astrology, which is kind of like this little sort of like
It's
mini
like yeah,
conference,
it's like an
like
not
little,
impromptu,
yeah.
but like, yeah, it's like a mini
But it's like
conference among
casual.
friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like for ideas that aren't really for the public. But so like the thought lot is an actual lot, like it actually exists. I did not make it up. It has another name, which I can't really remember off the top of my head, but it was basically
I
used
remember.
to. Oh, you
It's
do?
yeah, it's the chastity of women.
Oh, right, yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
by the way, by thought we mean THOT, as
Right,
kind of like
yeah, yeah,
slut, hoe, that type of
Yeah.
thought, not like
yeah.
thoughts or whatever.
Um yeah, so but like so that was kind of like used to see like if a woman was like promiscuous or whatever. But like in my presentation, I was kind of using it from like a more like positive perspective, like as
Like
a sort of
reclaiming
yeah,
sluttiness.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. Just like owning your thoughtness, which
We all do.
Yeah. Or
trust,
like
trust.
or like how there are different calculations for the lot of marriage, and like, a lot of traditional astrology is very gendered, and
Mhm.
how like if you are somebody who is non-binary or someone who is trans, it's like, how do the planets that are chosen to calculate these lots reflect your experience of attraction? Or like if you're not even like hetero, like how do these lots speak to your experience of attraction and things like that?
Yeah, that's always an interesting topic, and when talking about lots too, because yeah, there is that issue, I would say, of so many of the calculations being very gendered. And it's like, for a male, you use this calculation; for a female, you use this calculation. How does that translate for non-binary people? How does that translate for trans people? And it's sort of one of those things that I don't know if we have a solution to at this point.
I
So
I
it's
have been I have
even
been working
using
on one.
okay.
Like so I have been basically because the calculation for the lot of marriage is the same two planets. It's just one order for males and you just reverse that for women. But I was thinking, what if we just throw the gender part out and we just go with sect because
Mm,
we use sect for like most of the other lots. Like, if you were born during the day, you're going to use this one order. And if you were
mhm.
born at night, you can use this other order. So, like, my idea is to just do that instead. So, like, if you were born during the day, to use the quote unquote male calculation,
Mm-hmm.
and at night, to use the quote unquote female calculation. I haven't tested it enough to like feel confident in saying that that works for sure.
Mhm.
But it is like a idea for a solution.
I love that idea for a
Wait,
solution.
I want to ask you a little about that. So there are like way too many marriage lot calculations. It's kind of
Yeah.
gross how many there
It's
are.
annoying for some
Yeah.
people like me and Mo who want to know everything and want to
Yeah,
read
like I want to
the
know.
future.
Come on. Like I do remember like if anybody like was doing Ben Dykes's workshop at I think it was
Norwag
Norwag
2020.
2020. He does like mention like the I don't remember which lot of marriage formula he was using, but he was also incorporating sect, but there was still a gender thing where it's like the women born at night and men born during the day, I think had like the same formula. And then like women born during the day and men born at night have the same formula. It was really strange.
That is
That
really
sounds
strange.
complicated
It sounds
unnecessarily.
like
It's basically like if you're quote unquote like no like in the norm, or sort of like if your pieces fit, it's like women night,
yeah,
like women nocturnal, and I'm doing quotations for those listening.
it was very
Um,
strange.
that is so strange.
It
Yeah,
was
it's like
very
if you're
strange.
straight, you can go this way. If you're queer, you can go this way. It's almost like that, but
It
without
was
saying that. But
it was too much. And I can't remember which planets were used, but like I know different variations will use like Venus and Saturn to some extent,
Yeah, that's the one I'm
or
thinking of.
some will even do like
Sun
moon,
Venus.
sun Venus, or like moon Mars, depending on who.
Ooh.
Like I've seen moon
I
Mars
don't know
ones.
about Moon Mars.
Not for marriage, but thank you. I think I've seen that too, but
I've
I've
seen
seen
that.
some lots with Uranus. Like, there's so much like,
if
because
you could see me in Mo's face right now.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
there's somebody has a lot of homosexuality with your like they're just kind of like throwing random things together, which that's kind of like an issue even with ancient ancient authors, because like that, like I talked about, like we got these original Hermetic lots from the Paneretos, and everybody then just kind of like made up their own. So we see other people having different thought processes too, like like, so one person might think like, okay, like marriage, Venus and Saturn, like love and commitment, and somebody else might think like, oh, like sun Venus, like thinking like, oh, the sun light, generative, Venus love, like like you could sort of argue for either, even though like I think Venus Saturn makes more sense. So like just thinking about like how many astrologers there were, and like how many astrologers were writing things down, like, because actually most ancient astrologers mention the lots like in some way, shape, or form, like Dorotheus, like Valens, Rhetorius, just like all of these people, especially like the Arabic astrologers for real, which but so like just with that whole thing, there's a lot of differences between the formulas. Like there are actually even for the Hermetic lots, there's some disagreement on the formulas. So the law of necessity and the law of Eros, there are a couple alternate calculations for those, which don't really make sense, and they don't fit in with the rest of the 7. So I don't use those. Most people don't use those. I don't know anybody that does use those. But so that just goes to kind of like show that other people just kind of like had their own ideas, and they were, trying different things. So when going back and like even looking at the source material, or even like if you're online Googling and you're just trying to find out like more information on lots, like you have to discriminate between sources. Like you have to be skeptical, and you have to, kind of question things, and like think about the calculation, like, does it make sense? So like, well, I can just kind of like slide into this now, but so like the structure for the calculations, so we kind of like talked about with the lot of fortune, with the calculation for the day charts being from the sun to the moon, and then
real quick before
yeah.
you get into that,
Mhm.
do you mind if we show, I kind of want to show how to pull it up, because that PDF table might be
yeah.
helpful
Yeah, for sure.
for people like pulling this up first and then going through the calculations and how they're structured. So
Yes.
what I'm going to do is, again, if you're watching this version on the video version, we're going to go to astro.com and Jake's going to kind of walk us through how to pull up your 7 hermetic lots and then even additional tables of lots. And then yeah, I also kind of want to show AstroSeek's version, not version, but like their calculator, because that's also
Right.
helpful.
Yes.
Mhm.
I do use that one too.
Me
Cool.
too.
So when you go to astro.com, what you're going to do is hover over free horoscopes, go to the right hand column, down to extended chart selection. And I would make an account if I were you, or you can just do it as a guest. That should take you to this page that has extended chart selection. So where do we go from here, Jake?
Then you would go to chart drawing style, that little drop down box.
Chart drawing. Wait, okay. So
Right.
the
Yeah,
second
yeah,
drop down
right.
here.
Yeah, and then you're gonna go to Hellenistic.
Hellenistic.
Right, and then just click to show the chart. Right, and then you see it has PDF additional tables
yeah,
on the top. So yeah, you click on that and you have this PDF come up and it shows you like a list of all your planets and everything, your aspects, blah blah whatever. The first page is just kind of yeah. The second page though is the one that has your Greek lots. So it'll show your lot of fortune, your lot of spirit, necessity, Eros, courage, victory, Nemesis, and it'll just list the degrees next to all of them with the zodiacal symbol. So even though like there's not like an option to show like necessity, courage, victory, Nemesis like in this chart, you can still like see those degrees.
Yeah, like they're not shown on the wheel, but in the PDF tables it shows, and you can see that each one of these hermetic lots, aka Greek lots, again, everything sort of has double names in astrology, which is so mercurial. Each of these 7 lots are associated with one of the 7 traditional planets. So fortune is the lot of the moon, spirit or diamond is a lot of the sun, necessity is a lot of Mercury, Eros is a lot of Venus, courage is a lot of Mars, victory is a lot of Jupiter, and Nemesis is a lot of Saturn. And then they go over and show a couple other lots here on the right hand column, having to do with some basic stuff: father, mother, siblings, sons. Notice there's not daughters there.
Wonder why.
And then aren't there more at the bottom? Oh no, that's another.
No,
Yeah,
isn't that a different
That's another
Yeah,
one. So
drawing
should we go
style?
to that?
yeah, we can. The Arabic point.
Okay, so that's one way of pulling it up, and so we're going to do another way, which is a little problematic, right? Because it shows
Right.
a calculation that's not the one that we really want to work with for Eros. So,
Right.
well, okay, so I'm back at the extended chart selection page on astro.com, and now
Chart drawing style again.
chart drawing style again.
And Arabic point / Al-Biruni.
Click here to
And
show
this
chart.
this one has a lot more lots when you go to the PDF additional tables, but it uses those weird formulas for the lot of necessity and the lot of Eros. So those are the ones that we don't use. So it's going to show you the incorrect ones.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. Like if you click on like the Arabic points, like it will be the wrong Eros and necessity. But
So
like
what Jake's talking about is when you generate this chart, you can see the points for all the lots. See how my Eros is down here in Gemini? That's not the correct calculation, because my Eros is actually in Aquarius. But most of the other ones are correct, right? It's just that Eros calculation.
It's just Eros and necessity.
And necessity. Okay. Necessity is also incorrect here. Okay.
Yes.
So when we go to that additional PDFs, you'll see there's tons of other lots that they give you calculations for. And this is how we calculated the thought lot too. So you can calculate that for yourself if you want to see where your sluttiness lies. It's the chastity of women under seventh house themes. So mine's at 3 Virgo.
Yeah, it's specifically your thought if it's in hard aspect to a malefic, so
Yes.
Mars or Saturn.
Yeah, I was disappointed that mine's just conjunct Jupiter.
I think mine's square Saturn.
Hey, there you go. That
I've
explains a
since
lot.
forgotten mine.
But yeah, you can see here it kind of breaks down the lots into different themes related to the 12 houses and then other places too. There's other fortunes, debilitated bodies, there's a lot for real estate, there's a lot for debt and poverty, there's a lot for journeys, travel by water, there's a lot for buying and selling, medical treatment, like so many different lots. And so in terms of the calculations, if you go to these additional PDF tables, you'll see next to the lot there's a little formula for intercourse of man. Intercourse of a man, the formula is ascendant plus Venus minus sun. So yeah, you were about to elaborate more on calculations.
Right. So when you see that like put in kind of like that mathematical way, ascendant plus Venus minus sun, that actually means the distance from the sun to Venus, then projected from the ascendant. Like just so you can think about it in your head like that, it just reverses when you see like the plus and minus symbol,
That's
the order.
interesting. So it's almost like the way I would do it then, just to remind myself, is like, okay, I'm looking at this calculation. And then what I would do is sort of start at the end of the calculation and work backwards. So this planet to the next planet from the ascendant, I'll just kind of work backwards in that way.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's good for
Yeah,
me to
it always
remember.
confuses me with like the plus and minus because I'm like, what?
It is so confusing. Okay, from there, I want to look at AstroSeek because that's another great resource in terms of having a lot calculator. So astroseek.com, again, a great free resource for astrologers. We have, they have where's their lot calculator?
I think it's under the traditional astro.
Okay, so under free horoscopes, there's traditional astrology calculator.
Oh wait, is it not?
Maybe I should just Google it.
You might have to Google it because I know like there's a way.
Yeah, like I have it bookmarked.
AstroSeek.
Yeah, I have it bookmarked too because
if you just Google lots calculator AstroSeek, it comes up. So yeah, it's under free horoscopes, I guess, under here somewhere. So yeah, this is a great resource too because you can kind of, if you hear of a calculation somewhere, say we're just, as we're talking right now, you want to check it out for yourself, you can go to astroseek.com, enter in your birth info, up here, and then there's a lot formula. So from that one we were just talking about, intercourse of a man, right? Ascendant plus Venus minus sun. So what we would do, from what Jake just said, we're going to go backwards, right? Or
well,
no, so this is
no,
not for this. Sorry,
type it as
we're
is.
We're going to type it as is in this calculation. Sorry, in this calculator. So ascendant, what was it again? It was ascendant plus Venus. Okay, so yeah, Venus to the sun. So personal point is the ascendant. The significator is the sun, right?
No, or Venus first, then the
sun. Yeah, Venus. Yeah.
And then the sun. Okay, calculate the lot. Oh wait, I didn't put in a birth city.
It's fine.
Whatever. I'm just showing it. And so yeah, we're looking at ascendant plus Venus minus sun. So we're looking from the sun to Venus, right? And in this chart, the sun is at 10 degrees of Capricorn. We're going to go all the way around. All the way around until we get to Venus, which is at 4 degrees of Capricorn. And then we project that from the ascendant. So again, that distance comes all the way around until we get to 5 degrees of Libra, the sun is at 10 degrees or 11 degrees Libra. So yeah, this is another cool way of like visualizing that, and you can sort of like check your work and see it makes sense by visualizing it. Cool. Hopefully that was helpful for folks.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about the Hermetic lots, and I think specifically about fortune and spirit a little bit more.
Right. So the Hermetic lots, like I said, there's one for each planet. So the lot of fortune is the lot of the moon, and the lot of fortune was considered to be the most important lot. So the reason that is because it relates to the physical world, the physical environment. So if we think about the moon and like what the moon signifies, they mainly used it for this idea of like generation and corruption because the moon is the closest, heavenly body to Earth. So like we know that it, affects the tides, like it physically, literally, like affects things on Earth. But so just the idea that it goes through a full cycle in a month, like it kind of like grows and then dies. Like it was associated with this idea of like generation and corruption, like things growing and dying. So the lot of fortune and the lot of the moon often relates to the body, as being, like this physical thing that grows and dies. It also relates to your physical circumstances in life. So that generally includes, kind of like your upbringing. Like, did you have kind of like a good or like decent childhood? But it's more in the sense of like, did you have like what you needed? Like, were your needs met? Did you have food, clothing, shelter, like go to school, like, all of the things. It like also relates to wealth, and it's just kind of like this idea of fortune, in the sense of like luck too in your life, but it's very specifically, so you may have heard of the goddess Fortuna, which is the Roman goddess of luck, and the lot of fortune is also kind of like called Fortuna. So that association kind of like gives us this idea of fortune, and Fortuna is blind, and she's also often depicted with a wheel or a ship's rudder. So just this idea of like things changing, like fate changing. And this kind of like then gets associated with the idea of like fate and like fortune being like fickle, and like fortune can change easily. A lot of Roman altars to Fortuna were in like bathhouses where they would gamble. So, like this idea of like luck and fortune, like being with you, like even in chance like situations, like rolling some dice, like seeing like, okay, like is fortune going to be with me? You can also see Fortuna in art, like depicted on like a wheel with like people of like different statuses, because you can tell by like their clothes and shit. Like, like the king will be like up at the top of the wheel, and like a peasant might be at the bottom. But the idea is that it's a wheel, so it is turning. So people, even slaves could like buy their freedom and like become free. It wasn't like a lifetime thing, like for sure, like there was the opportunity to kind of like go from rags to riches. So just like this idea of Fortuna and like things being in your favor really aligns with a lot of fortune. So even though when we talk about the lot of fortune being like related to your body and like being so important and like related to kind of like your wealth and like things like that, it's still a very broad lot, so it doesn't get used as much like specifically. So like when people do ZR, they use angles from fortune, like they're looking at things angularly from fortune to kind of like see how that aspect of like fortune or luck is like basically like making the events happen. But they will usually be doing releasing from spirit. So releasing from spirit is going to tell you things that are much more relevant and like much more it's like generally the shit that people want to know, you know, like career, you know, like making actual active choices, because, you know, a lot of spirit, it's well, we can kind of get into that now. The lot of spirit is the lot of the sun, and it relates to the spirit or the consciousness. I like to say the soul, even though the soul kind of like has a lot of baggage just as a word.
Yeah.
It also relates to like career and spirituality too, specifically. So the lot of spirit, something that Robert Zoller said about the lot of spirit is that it's, well, I'm paraphrasing, but it's kind of like what you admire and what you aspire to. So the admiration part is kind of, you know, going into your spirituality and your faith, and it's kind of like what you think God would be like. So whether you think God is like wrathful, or whether God is like merciful or all knowing, or, you know, like whatever the case may be, you kind of like admire like this aspect of existence. And then that kind of like leads into what you aspire to in your career through this idea that it's kind of like if you think that something is so important that God is going to be worried about it, like you're probably going to be worried about it too. So then that kind of like becomes part of your career, but also kind of like just how you like move and like think, and like what your kind of like goals and motivations in life are. Um, Kirah, do you care if I put your lot of spirit on blast?
No, I don't.
Wait,
Were you
what's your
gonna say
spirit? I
something, Mo?
forgot. I forgot.
Oh, mine's at like
Um,
18 Libra.
Yeah, yeah.
wow. Okay.
So Kira's lot of spirit is in Libra. She also has Venus in Libra, and it's in her eighth house. Like there's stuff with that, but just this idea, just even like this base general idea of the lot of spirit being in Libra and being ruled by Venus, like she's got practices for Venus, like ritual practices
Yeah.
already. Like that's, you know, like Venus is just chilling in the eighth house. Like it's not, you know, it doesn't seem like it's something that would be as major, but it kind of like is, you know, like Kirah went to art school, like Kirah knows like everybody. Kirah is very social. Like that's
It's
kind of
true.
like how she's got all these connections, you know, like all of the guests that she's had on her podcast. Like this is very, you know, like Venus, Libra spirit, like somebody that is, you know, very connective, very social. My lot of spirit is in Gemini, and it's ruled by Mercury and Sag. So like my
I also have a
motivation,
Gemini ruled spirit as well.
yes.
Mine's in Virgo though, ruled by Gemini Mercury. Like
Oh,
Ooh.
that's awesome. See, that's nicer than mine because mine's like Mercury and Sag. But so like I'm just kind of like motivated by curiosity. I'm just kind of like, what are these lots? Like the fuck is that? Like, let me figure it out. So yeah, so like that's kind of like how the law of spirit then, you know, leads into career. Like Kira's always talking about, you know, like how she's always talking to astrologers, like, you know, always that social aspect. Like mine, on the other hand, like I'm all into astrology because like there's so much to learn. There's just like all of this like weird, cool, like neat information. And it's just like it keeps me mentally stimulated.
That makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I do like Fortune and Spirit because like for one, they're both the two lots that will kind of influence the calculations for the other Hermetic lots.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
also just like so a lot of people don't realize that both of these lots are like a mixture of, you know, your big three. It's like, okay, if we had to combine your big three in these two ways, like
SMR, SMR.
yeah, your SMR big three, your SMR like
SMR.
and okay, SMR.
I'm joking, I'm joking.
No, but now it's like, okay, the Libra spirit, I have to influence public opinion. There you go. So yeah, it's like your SMR rolled into these two lots, one that's representing like, you know, how your circumstances interface with you, but also like that which you worship and aspire to. And I really like fortune houses a lot. Like, I mean, you can do houses from spirit, but like
You can do houses from anything, honestly, but fortune is the
And
most
I just want to
notable.
like note real quick why
Mhm.
why fortune, and you kind of touched on it, Jake, but just so people get it, it's because fortune is a lot of the moon, and the moon is the closest heavenly body to us. And so when we're talking about things manifesting in the physical realm, in this like earthly realm,
Mhm.
things actually happening to us. um we're talking about the moon because that's where that's sort of like that body that is kind of manifesting things in this realm. Everything kind of comes through. If we're talking about the order of the spheres of the planets as far back as Saturn, that's kind of where things come through, and then they pass through all the other sort of spheres of the
Mhm.
planets until they get to the moon. And we exist in the sublunar realm, where the moon's sort of that last thing that things have to pass through in order to like manifest into this physical realm. So the lot of the moon is so important because we're talking about things happening to us. um that's where it's rooted in. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. And if you think about just like the fluctuating nature of the moon, it's like life is this birth death cycle process. Whereas, like, the sun is more constant in its motion, it's not moving as fast all the time. So, like, while your fortune like does fluctuate and change, the things you worship and aspire to do not. Like,
Right. And the
there's
sun, the
something
sun's
you're
light never dies, and that's why our spirit doesn't die. When our physical forms
exactly.
die, the spirit does
Mhm.
not.
Yeah. And so I really like fortune houses because, I mean, so if you read Valens, Vettius Valens is another main Hellenistic text that a lot of current practitioners of Hellenistic astrology use. And this was my
Stan.
gateway to the lots. I stand him, obviously. He does talk about looking at places from fortune as well to describe certain elements of the native's life and, okay, person's life, sorry, using different words. The person's life and kind of what they aspire to and like what they're seeking. So one thing that I took from Valens is that you can actually look at the positions of the ruler of fortune relative to angles from fortune, but you can also do this with, the ruler of spirit. And I think there are two other lots as well. So the lot of basis and exaltation. So basis is all about, I feel like it's all about like, it's kind of another one of those lots that has to do with like circumstances and how they like benefit you. So it's like kind of your benchmark, your baseline. And then exaltation is obviously about like your propensity for fame. And you could look at the condition of the lords of fortune, spirit, basis, and exaltation to see how noble like a birth would be. And what you would do is you'd look at their positions relative to the cosmic angles, which is like just your regular ascendant, or you could do it with respect to the fortune angles. And you want to see that one or all of those plant like lords is angular relative to the regular ascendant, but also from fortune. And it's even better if they're like in fortune 10th, because that says something about like the level of achievement that I don't want to say that a person is destined for, but like the tendencies like towards which they get shoved, kind of,
That makes
because
sense. I have ruler of fortune angular in the 10th from fortune.
so it's like, it's like these are the things that you kind of get shoved to, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Um, and then like just looking at the chart from fortune, I think it's like the way I'm starting to see it now is just kind of like, okay, this is how your life circumstances are set up. And these are the kinds of experiences you may feel more drawn to, where you feel like you're more prone to encounter. And then that kind of is playing in the background, regardless of like what your natal angles are doing. But like, I don't know, that's just something that I've started noticing, especially because you can also perfect from your lot of fortune as well, on top of like perfecting from the ascendant. And you'll find that certain events related to like your lot comes up, but this is more true when your lot meets its ruler by perfection, and you'll start noticing that you're encountering more circumstances, I guess, that are trying to pull you in a particular direction, if that makes sense. That's something that I've started to grapple with my own chart, but I'm starting to see it in other people's charts as well.
So layered. When you say lot comes to fortune by perfection, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so what a lot of people don't realize about perfections is that it's not only the ascendant that moves like one sign per year. You can actually rotate the whole chart one sign per year. So like if the ascendant,
okay.
Yeah. And so say you're in a 10th house year from the ascendant, like wherever the lot is natally, it's like now 10 signs away from its original position.
Gotcha.
So it's like the whole chart just rotates.
Wow.
And you can interpret some interesting things based on that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what I meant, guys, when I said we're getting into some advanced techniques, like very far away from the basics, but it's always so fascinating. And I always learn so much from you, Mo and Jake, and everyone in the community. That's why I do this goddamn show. Because I'm like, it's not fair that I'm like, I feel like I'm hoarding all this cool info from you guys. Gotta share it. Okay, yeah. So to kind of keep talking about places from the lots, what we're talking about is sort of, are we talking about derivative houses? Do we even
It's kind of like derived houses, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm like, do we explain that?
Yeah.
Like derivative. Okay. So really what we're talking about is we're using a technique sort of called derivative houses. And what that is you take a topic, say we're talking about home, right? I'm going to sell my house or whatever, something like that. We're talking about home, family stuff. We would look to the fourth house and it's almost like projecting that into the ascendant, or making the fourth house the ascendant. So it's sort of like turning the chart. So the fourth house is now in the place where the ascendant is, and then reading the chart from the perspective of that house being at the ascendant. So that's this technique called derivative houses. It's really cool and fun to do. You know, if you want to look at, say, maybe like how your partner views you, do your make your descendant your ascendant and sort of like read that chart. And that's almost like looking at your chart from the perspective of a partner. That's just like one example. So when we're talking about houses from fortune, which Mo did a talk about for Fresh Voices, in particular, the house that's 11th from fortune, we're basically talking about putting fortune on the ascendant. So whatever sign the lot of fortune falls in for you, sort of turning the wheel of your chart and making that sign the first house. And then looking at and then kind of going from there. So in this talk, Mo was talking about the place of acquisition, which is the sign that is 11th from fortune. So it's almost as if you put fortune in the first house, and then you go all the way around to the 11th house what that kind of reoriented chart looks like. And that is the place of acquisition. So for example, my lot of fortune is in Cancer. 11th from Cancer would be Taurus. My place of acquisition is Taurus in my chart. I hope I explained that well enough.
No, yeah, that's literally exactly it. And then, I mean, you can read it like a birth chart, and you might notice that there are certain themes that do show up in your life that echo that. But something that I kind of wanted to ask Jake about, because I remember like talking with you about this, because fortune and spirit are, this like amalgam of your SMR, your lunar phase plus your ascendant are basically baked into these formulas. And you'll notice quickly that people born during certain lunar phases, it doesn't matter if you're born during the day or at night. You'll notice the lots tend to fall in specific places depending on your lunar phase.
Yes.
And so I kind of wanted to open this topic up with Jake because I know you've been like delving into it. And anybody who's like heard about like lunar phase personalities, you'll notice really quickly that people who like they describe full moon people as being like very relationship oriented and like focused on other people, whereas like new moon people are more focused on themselves, kind of. I mean, I feel like most of that is coming from the 12 letter alphabet. Aries is self, Libra is other, like view of things. But I also like just looking at the fact that people with full moons will always have their both of their lots hanging out somewhere near the seventh whole sign house, and people with their with new moons or close to new moons will always have their lots of fortune and spirit somewhere near the first whole sign house. I do wonder if there's some kind of like accidental truth to that, at least in your experience, Jake. Like if there's some like accidental truth to that.
Yeah, I think so, because like, so we are using Dane Rudyard's significations for the kind of like lunar phases. So, like new moon, first quarter, like all of that kind of stuff. So they do have like these sort of significations, and he uses a sort of like plant life cycle. So the new moon's kind of like, like a seed being planted, then when it starts waxing, like then it is kind of like, growing, breaking up out the ground, like, so it goes through kind of like these different like phases or like struggles. And the lots of fortune and spirit actually like reflect that pretty well. So basically, like with the lot of fortune and spirit, like the calculations are always going to reflect the same aspect between the sun and the moon in your chart with the ascendant. So like if you have like a exact first quarter moon, like this sun square the moon, that's always going to put the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit square to your ascendant. So
just
one's
so
going to
everyone
be
knows, sorry, I'm pulling this up on the screen if you're watching the video version, so you can see kind of how the lots where the lots fall in regards to like new moons and full moons. And like Jake was saying, if you can see this for the upcoming Taurus new moon, I just pulled this up. When the sun and the moon are conjunct like that, or so close to conjunct like that, there is no distance between, there's such little distance between the sun and the moon. So when we're projecting, that distance from the ascendant, it just ends up in the first house near the ascendant. And you can see that here with this new moon, how the lot of spirit and a lot of fortune are just conjunct the ascendant. The same thing happens. The opposite thing happens at a full moon where the sun and the moon are opposite one another. So if we're projecting that opposition 180 degrees, right, from the ascendant, you're going to get the lot of spirit and fortune on the descendant.
And then if I understand correctly, with the quarter moons, I'm pretty sure fortune is always going to fall in the fourth house.
Yeah.
If you are wait,
yeah, it depends on
it
like
gets weird.
Yeah,
it gets weird.
It depends on like what time of day you're born, because like the
Right.
calculations will change too. But just
Okay.
like having that like aspect between the sun and the moon like be repeated from your ascendant, like that then kind of like creates this pattern and like this dynamic. So like if you have a first quarter moon, the idea is kind of like like breaking through things, like kind of like getting to some challenges. And, when you have the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit, like, opposing each other generally like in the 10th house and the fourth house, because like it kind of varies, that usually creates like this tension around like home and work. So like I've seen somebody that had that, and I don't remember like which lot was in like which house, but actually I want to say that their lot of fortune was in the fourth house and spirit was in the 10th house. So like they worked a lot, and like they would travel for work and stuff, but to kind of like offset that, like they would work from home like most of the time. So like there was that fortune in the fourth house, like their physical location was at home, like they were at home, in that place, but their spirit essentially was, you know, like going out and like doing like these career things. So like with the lot of spirit then being in the 10th house, you know, like that's being projected outwards, you know, like it's got like a lot more going on. So like even though they were at home and like that was their physical location, you know, like they were out and doing like other things. So you can kind of like see the dynamic you know, repeat. So like full moon people who, you know, like they are said to have like a lot more of like this relational quality, just thinking about, you know, like the sun and moon as a pair. And, you know, like it's when the moon is brightest, you know, like it's completely full of the sun's light, you know, like they are paired, they're bonded essentially. So when you have that aspect, like that then puts the lot of fortune and spirit in the 7th house, which, you know, like when you're talking about like your body and your soul, like when that's essentially being put in the 7th house of like partnerships and others, like it's going to be a really important part of your life. So, you know, like then lunation phase kind of connects like to these different like lot placements and sort of like reflects similar themes, which I have a workshop that I'm like sort of like halfway through with on that whole topic. I've got like examples going for like all of the lunation phases,
That's awesome.
which I'll have to finish eventually.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is like us pressuring you into finishing it.
Yeah.
But like I really liked how you talked about like the juxtaposition between like the square, like the either the closing or the waxing square, and how there's that opposition between spirit and fortune. And something that I noticed was that in some of my chart examples, hold on, stop. I'm recording a podcast. Anyway,
Silly
sorry,
boyfriend issues.
yeah, partner just got home from work. Anyway, so something that I noticed is that like with people, I had some celebrity charts that I distinctly remember. I can't remember who, but I noticed that like their fortune was in the 10th, but their spirits in the 4th, right? And I noticed that a lot of those people tended to do career things that would like allow them to be good representatives of their culture and where they came from, because at the end of the day that was what was really important to them.
That makes a
You
lot of
know?
sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, for sure. With spirit in the 4th house, like, yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
so it's like interesting how like people with like the sun moon square are just like struggling, because it's like, okay, that which I worship is different from like where I'm rooted or like where my circumstances seem to be taking me. And then like life is a constant struggle for them to like reconcile that.
Yeah. I have that with the square. My fortune and spirit are square one another. And yeah, they're also like in signs that like are involved with the nodes, and the rulers of my fortune and spirit are opposite each other and square my excuse me, squaring my nodes. So yeah, I so feel that. Wow. Okay, so we talked about a lot. We talked about zodiacal releasing, why we like kind of base it all off of fortune, but most of us will look to releasing from spirit, or Eros, which I'm always looking at Eros too. You know, if you're a hopeless romantic like you might want to check out your ZR from Eros and see when your next peaks are. We talked about the places from the lots, which I think are really, it's such a rich topic. Do you have any other like examples? I know we talked about the place of acquisition, but like other examples in terms of like places from particular lots? Do you feel like 11th from any of the lots would be important?
I don't know. I would give that one to Jake more so, just because he works with more other lots than I do.
Yeah.
I would personally like focus more on like the like aspects. So like the 11th house from spirit like is gonna be positive, like because it's gonna have like a sextile to the lot of spirit. So like even if like you don't call it like the place of acquisition, like it's still gonna have like that positive relationship. So
Right.
you know, if you have anything in there, like anything kind of like going on, it's still gonna have like that similar dynamic. So, you know, it is kind of like using, derivative houses. So just thinking about, like the relationship between things. So, like
Mm-hmm.
if this is the starting point, then like where is this other thing in relation to that?
That makes sense.
Like even just kind of like starting from somewhere other than the ascendant.
I did have a question for you, Jake. Which,
Yes.
yeah, this is a question I've been asked before too. So I'm excited your answer. Do you look at transits to the lots?
Yes, for
And
sure.
okay, because I did text you the other day being like, something's happening while Jupiter's transiting my lot of Eros, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. And I'm like, I just didn't know if that like did make sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. Transits to the
Yeah,
lots.
so like um the Venus retrograde in Gemini, because I have the lot of Eros, the lot of Spirit, and the lot of Nemesis all in Gemini, which
Oh my
is yeah,
gosh.
fun.
I have a lot of lots in
Um
Gemini too.
so like having like the Venus retrograde go through there, or like right now with Mars, like the Venus was fun. Like that's when I met like Zach Powell, and like we kind of like became friends like during that Norwalk thing and like all of that. But yeah, just like having planets transiting lots, having lots activated by perfection. So like even if you're just perfecting from the ascendant and you're just like, okay, like I'm in a sixth house here, which I am in a sixth house here. So like that's Gemini in my chart, which I just said, like I have all those lots in Gemini. So all of those topics are activated. I've had some like Nemesis topics activated. Like I've had some real serious bullshit with other people. I've had some Eros stuff going on. Like it did not go on for a long time, but it went on. Um and right now, like I'm doing a podcast, like this is my first time on a
Mhm.
podcast. Like this is a
Oh wow.
spirit kind of like thing.
Wow.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, cool. So transits to lots are meaningful. Would you say like a lunation on a lot would be meaningful as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Pretty much like any, because the lots like you can kind of think of them like the same way that you do the ascendant. Like, the ascendant is a point, like it's a specific point that's important, but it's also an entire house. So like it's your whole first house. So if we think about lots as the same kind of thing, like you can think of like that specific degree, like, okay, that's important, like the same as if something was gonna like aspect your ascendant. Exactly. Like that degree is important. But also, even if you just like had some planets going through your ascendant, like same idea with the lot. Like if you have planets like going through that sign, like it's part of the lot. So
Hmm.
basically, like, like the same as angles.
Interesting. Awesome. That's so good
Yeah.
to know.
Or like even thinking about your Saturn return, because like I know everybody's like, oh, the degree is just when I have my Saturn return. It's like, no, Saturn's entire movement through the whole sign. It's
Hmm.
just that when it hits the actual degree, it's like, okay, something is actually big, noticeable, and popping off. It's like the apex of whatever action
Right. Yeah. The
you need to
peak.
experience related to the lot in this case.
Cool.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the lot of Nemesis, and I kind of wanted to talk about some of the other Hermetic lots.
Oh
And
yeah,
I
I
actually
would
Yeah.
had
love
this
to.
I had this experience on Clubhouse the other day, and someone was like, "Yeah, like I just don't like this particular sign. I really don't like them." And it was funny is it like so something I've noticed about signs that tend to hang out and get along is that usually like people get along well with people who like have the same modality or the
Hmm.
same element or like the same polarity. So it's like I know people go, oh yeah, like signs that are square opposite shouldn't get along, but it's like you guys like
They have a lot in
function
common.
very you function so similarly
Yeah.
and like
So I fixed signs are like huge stands for one another. Like fixed signs can't leave each
exactly
other alone.
they really can't. It's like a problem. And but then like when you have like houses that are making favorable aspects to your ascendant, it's like, okay, so say you're like a Cancer rising, and it's like, I should like Pisces or Scorpio, but I don't. Or
Hmm.
like people say when you have, especially in like romance, you attract people who have your 5th house and your 7th house. And while that's true, generally, I find more that like I actually don't enjoy like people with suns in my 7th house. I actually don't. I for some reason I just avoid them at all costs. And then I looked and I think I remember Jake was saying something with lots, and then I was like, I have a lot of Nemesis in the 7th house.
So do I.
Like, I'm like,
yeah.
This is probably why I don't. Like, I've done it a couple times, and then it's just like, not
I'm
for me.
right there with you, Mo, because we have the same ascendant, so I know exactly the sign you're talking about.
It's like not for me. And this person,
well
lo and
with
behold,
like other placements in that sign, but not as much
but
as
not the sun.
Yeah,
no, the sun. This person was like, yeah, I don't like this sign, and I was like, where's your lot of Nemesis? And they laughed. They were like, it's right here with my lot of fortune. And I was like,
yeah,
screaming.
that's amazing. Oh my gosh. I struggle with my lot of Eros because I feel like that's one sign I like don't like that much.
Same.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
So do we want to like go through
let's talk about
the other Hermetic plots?
Yeah, let's talk about them.
Yes, please.
Okay, so after we have Fortune Spirit, we have the lot of necessity, which is the lot of Mercury. So like that one was considered really bad, like really bad. Like we usually don't really think of like Mercury as being like that bad. Like Mercury retrograde, like
not
annoying.
fuck with Mercury.
They were not.
Guys, Mercury rules thieves.
Yeah,
scammers,
exactly. And you know why?
Tricksters. I mean, come on.
The tricksterness. Yeah, I think part of it, honestly, it's scapegoating the one planet that does not play by the rules that most other planets play by. And that's why, Mercury, you talk about, okay, what planet's benefic? These planets are benefic, these planets are malefic. Mercury, either or, common. These planets are diurnal, these planets are nocturnal. Mercury can go either way, right? So it's like it's common nature, and it's by corporality, its mutableness, if you will, makes it so. I feel like if you're someone who really likes order and structure and for things to fit in certain places, maybe that like shiftiness of Mercury would not be something that you're into.
So an example that I like to use for the lot of necessity is Jane Fonda. She has the lot of necessity in her 10th house, which she's Camp Rising. So her 10th house is Libra. And she has Venus in Sag in her 12th house. So she is majorly known for protesting, criticizing the government. The 10th house signifies leadership, government, whatever. So she's like bringing that negative kind of like critical energy to the 10th house. Like she showed up on their doorstep talking shit, basically. So they put her in jail. They said no more.
Oh my God, Venus 12.
Yeah. Which she got out. She's fine. But just the fact that like that happened, like that was an event in her life. Like the whole like I think there was like a fake drug bust. Like she had like some like vitamins and stuff, and like she was like very publicly like arrested in the airport. And just like a whole bunch of other things, like with protesting, and like just it's a very visible part of her life. But so like in other people's charts, like I usually see necessity around places that they get a lot of criticism or like kind of give it. So people that have it in the 7th house, they're kind of like critical of like relationship dynamics and like just that whole kind of like institution, like idea of like partnership. I've seen people with it in like the 3rd house, and like their siblings are like super critical of their, just like whatever they do, like siblings are like on their neck. But yeah, just kind of like that energy, which the words they used to describe the lot of necessity was enemies, hatreds, contentions, like things like that. So, I mean, you can kind of see like it's that pretty, like negative language, but
Mhm.
I have kind of like boiled it down to that sort of like critical energy. But then, so we have the lot of Eros, which is the lot of Venus. Which the lot of Eros is the lot of Venus. So it relates to things that we enjoy. It's calculated with Venus and the lot of Spirit. So from that we can kind of like get to this idea that it's not just physical things. This is basically talking about like the things that are pleasing to our spirit. So when most people hear the lot of Eros, they hear Eros and they think like, ooh, erotic, like, so like this is just like sex. No. That
Oh my God.
that does kind of like go with the lot of Eros, like that is part of it. But it is also like hobbies, things that you just like doing yourself.
Listen, I'm
Yes.
so glad you brought that up because I know a lot of people who are like, yeah, releasing from Eros is not lining up with my sex life.
Mm,
And I was like, I remember specifically telling people, yeah, well, like,
fortune.
I've just been like listening to Jake talk about lots in general. And like, I keep up with all of Jake's like lots things because they're very informative. And
Thank you.
when you mentioned like it just being about, okay, these are things that I actively find pleasurable, and these are pleasures I want to pursue, which makes sense because this is a lot that's derived from the law of spirit, the things you actively pursue and choose to engage with. And so I'm like, what about like art or other things you like? You know what I mean? Like you might
Yeah,
not even like sex. Like that could be a thing. You might not even like it. So why would you do it?
that's true. I feel
you know?
like well, from when I learned about the lot of arrows, which when I learned about zodiacal releasing, it was through Chris Brennan talking about the lot of arrows. Like that was
Mm-hmm.
the first thing I learned. So I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm destined to have a shitty love life for the first 30 years of my life. Cool, cool, cool. That changes in less than 2 months. I finally leave this L1 30-year Saturn period in June. Um, but from what I gathered from both Chris Brennan and Lisa Scheim and them talking about the lots and ZR with Eros, it tends to speak to the peak periods will tend to speak to when you meet someone. Um, Less so like it doesn't necessarily have to do with sex, is what I mean. It's like a lot of it has to do with relationships too, which is
Mm-hmm.
Venus, and like forming relationships and partnerships with folks. So that doesn't always mean romantic relationships either. But I think Eros peaks at least can speak to when you connect with someone like in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eros. Eros just in general, like it often relates to things that people prefer, like things and people that somebody would prefer. So you
Mm.
may like people that have, placements in your lot of Eros more. Or also the ruler of your lot of Eros. That's important too. So if you, like have Eros in Virgo and like Mercury in Aquarius, like maybe you do prefer like Aquarius type people more than Virgo, like that kind of thing. But yeah, so like Eros, in the like examples that I've looked at, like it usually lines up super well with like people's hobbies, which I feel like is a really easy way because like some people just aren't really social, so like they don't really like have anything to kind of like report on that end, but then
Mm-hmm.
like they'll have like 37 other like side projects and like hobbies that they like to do. So like Mercury ruled Eros like usually like majorly needs like mental stimulation. Mars ruled Eros, or like Mars involved. It's usually kind of like more energetic, like they're like more into kind of like sports and like working out and like exercise and just like physical exertion, that kind of thing. I've seen like a lot of repetition of like people really liking the classics with Eros in Libra, which it's funny because like it'll be the classics of like different genres of like topics. So like, you know, somebody might be into classic like literature, some people might be into like classic architecture.
Classic
Like,
rock.
yeah, like it's just classic whatever.
Very exalted Saturn.
Yeah. I
Um
love that. Interesting.
yeah, so next we have the lot of courage, which is the lot of Mars, which I honestly don't really do as much with a lot of courage, just because like I don't really find it to be as relevant in people's lives. They used to use a lot of courage for things like would you be in the military or like would you be a cavalryman or you know like things like that, which honestly isn't the most relevant thing in most people's lives. You know, like unless you have some kind of like connection to the military or things like that, like
What
it's
about like
probably
first
not.
responders or folks who are sort of like on the front
Mm.
lines in other ways? I wonder if like even seeing like a physician or something might be related to that. Just thinking about other things that Mars rules, you
Yeah,
know?
like I could see like first responders, like things like that. You know, like firefighters, like EMS, like stuff like that.
What
Um,
about people like, because you know, like it is a Martian lot, and what about people who are like activistic, like revolutionary, like you know, people who would be in
Fighting, but
like
against like the
fighting
state, yeah,
in
or
some way,
oppression, yeah.
like yeah,
I feel like necessity makes more
more
That
sense
makes
for
sense for
kind
sense.
of
that.
like
Yeah.
that, but like
Okay.
I get the idea that you're going like, but I
Mhm.
mean honestly, like I haven't looked at enough kind of like examples of I guess sort of like heroic people to really
Mm.
yeah.
That's yeah,
Um
it's interesting.
yeah, so next we have the lot of victory, which is the lot of Jupiter. Which the lot of victory is a fun one because it usually indicates nice things. So being the lot of Jupiter, its main signification is allies. So it usually, when I see clients' charts, it usually indicates some sort of positive like assistance or luck or benefit in that area of their life. So this is kind of like what people used to or like kind of like think fortune is like this is the actually like good stuff for sure like because fortune can be you know good or bad. So with a lot of victory, you know, depending on the house placement, it can show like where you have allies or assistants. So, like, I personally have the lot of victory in the fourth house. And, you know, I've had like really good luck with housing. I just moved recently and I like got a place like right in the kind of like heart of the city, like in the best kind of like bougie area, like it's really nice.
Wow.
Like it's not too expensive. Like it's just like a really good area. And like I it was super last minute too. And it was just like somebody that knew somebody kind of thing.
And even before this, you had like a great living situation
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I was living in like a 4-bedroom house without paying rent. I was working as a grant writer though to kind of like cover that. But so like it had my, you know, like rent covered essentially from, you know, like doing something that probably was not worth, you know, like staying in a massive house, which was super unnecessary because I do not need that much space, but it was super nice. You know, it's not something that other people have the opportunity to have. But so like other clients I've seen, you know, people with victory in the 10th house or the 6th house, and they've gotten like all of their jobs through like referrals or recommendations or things like that. Just kind of like knowing somebody who knows somebody, you know, like that whole
Mm,
allyship.
I need to start abusing that.
You should for sure.
You should.
Which is kind of like interesting for my chart because my lot of victory is in Aries in the fourth house, which I have a day chart. So that means that Mars is my malefic out of sect,
Mhm.
but Mars is also my lord of victory. So like Mars is promising both bad things and good things for me in my chart. So like it's interesting when you add lots into the chart because, you know, like all of these things already have like their own significations. Like, you know, you probably already know like what's going on generally in your chart. But then when you add the lots on top of that and like things are, you know, ruling these additional topics, you know, you can have things like, you know, your malefic out of sect then ruling, you know, like positive things, like victory. So like it adds this whole other layer of you know, interpretation and kind of like connecting dots that you may not have even known existed. So then that leads us to the last lot, which is the lot of Nemesis, which is the lot of Saturn, which most people kind of like hear Nemesis and they think like, ooh, like an enemy, like a villain. No, like most people don't have like an arch nemesis. Some people do have a nemesis. But it's generally things that are like heavy or difficult in your life. They used to also call the lot of nemesis the heavy part, which just kind of like refers to heavy topics, things that are kind of like weighty and like, you know, just kind of like weigh down on you. I sort of talk about it as being kind of like a cold draft in your chart. Like it's just this part of your chart that's like dark and like drafty and it's just cold and it's not a cool place to be. Like you don't really want to hang out there. So usually like there are difficulties, kind of like Saturnian sort of delays, challenges, kind of like being held back, you know, more of kind of like this negative sort of like Saturn vibe with the lot of Nemesis. Yeah, and that is the 7 Hermetic
Most face,
lots.
sorry.
I just thought of a very specific ex.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's something. Like, no, I think I really also, do you remember which lots are, because I don't remember all the formulas off the top of my head, like of the other 5 lots, like because I know some of them have spirit in the formula and then others have fortune.
You're talking about like basis, exaltation, that type of stuff?
No, like the other hermetic lots. So like
which ones have fortune and spirit? Necessity is fortune, is from fortune. Eros is from spirit. Courage is from fortune. Victory is spirit, and Nemesis is fortune. So they just like one after another switch off.
I love how all the more difficult or problematic ones have fortune.
Yes, that makes sense.
They will fuck with your life.
Which is interesting, you know, because we're talking like at least with Saturn and Jupiter, Saturn and Mars. Yeah, never mind. Sorry. I'm like doing weird things in my head. But that's interesting. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Wow. This is sorry, go ahead.
I guess it makes sense because like you want to chase good things while you want to mitigate bad things. Because like bad things happen to you anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Nobody asks for bad things.
Most people don't.
Okay, most people don't.
I wanted to talk about resources a bit. Where can people learn more besides both of your Fresh Voices talks? In this, this episode, we have astro.com for generating, those tables. We have astroseek.com for using the calculator. But yeah, any other resources you guys would recommend for folks?
Yeah. So for reading, there is Paulus, the translation by James Holden. That's pretty good because Paulus
is an ancient astrologer.
Yes. Paulus of Alexandria. He writes about the lots, like specifically referring to the Panaretos, so he's a pretty good source for that. There is a book by Robert Zoller, The Arabic Parts in Astrology. I like parts of that, and parts were really, really just weird and just kind of like out there. And it also uses the incorrect calculations for Eros and necessity. So like that's a book. But yeah, like grains of salt. There's also like a lot of really good stuff in Sol. Saul has he actually has delineations for the lot of fortune in each of the 12 houses.
Cool.
So like that's a really good resource. There's also like a lot of stuff about lots in like most of the ancient sources, although that there aren't really a whole lot of like modern sources, because a lot of people often ask me like, hey, like I've been trying to Google this and like there is nothing.
You're
Where do
like,
I
I'm
go? And
making
I'm
it.
like,
I'm making the
yeah,
content.
yeah, I'm working on it. I have blogs on my website. On like fortune, working on spirit. I have Eros
What's your
up and
website?
like oracularjake.com, which
Cool.
is the same as my Twitter and Instagram. I'm just at oracularjake, so it's all easy to remember.
Cool. And that'll be in the
Um,
show notes as well.
yes.
Do you have any
So,
sources?
I mean, Jake covered most of them. Like, the only other one I would add is if you kind of want to understand fortune houses is what's it called? The free translation of balance that's just floating around on the internet. So the thing is, he kind of merges them with like describing the houses in general. So it's like a lot of the same significations of the regular houses he talks about, but then he has a special description about 11th from fortune. I think he goes into 6th from fortune because that has health implications, and then 8th from fortune, which, you know, they talk about death, but we're not getting into that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, like if you want more about like the hermetic plots, there isn't a lot that's, you know, available. I know that what's it called? There's, I think it's like, is it like Seven Stars Astro? It's this one traditional like astrology blog or something like that that has like a lot of resources on just Hellenistic, medieval, and they do talk about the different hermetic lots. If you're into ZR and you want to interact with someone who's not Chris Brennan, um, uh, you know, I think
Lisa
it's
Shime is another
Lisa Shime
ZR
is
person.
wonderful. She's
Yeah.
great. And then Patrick Watson,
Patrick's one.
he has a
Yeah.
lot of resources on ZR, and I know he periodically drops gems on his Patreon about like the more in-depth, advanced like considerations for zodiacal releasing.
He's
Yes.
fingers crossed, who's who I'm hoping to get on to talk about ZR eventually.
Oh my God,
He
I
doesn't know
was
that,
thinking of
so
him. I was thinking of him actually when you mentioned that. I was like,
yeah.
oh my God, you have to have Patrick.
A dream
He's
would be
just
Patrick
really,
and Lisa, so we'll see what I can pull off. That will be jam packed with good
yeah,
info. But yeah, those are like the
yeah.
ZR. Chris Brennan, Lisa Shime, and Patrick Watson are like the ZR folks, in my opinion.
That's the ZR gang. They're like
Yeah,
the
the people
Holy
that
Trinity
know the
of ZR.
things.
Yeah.
Cool. And where can we find more of you, Mo?
So for now, I'm just on Twitter. I'm Austral Tour. I don't have a website. I like killed my Wix page because I got tired of fake them.
But you do have a podcast.
I do have a podcast. So I have the Fixed Astrology podcast, which we are Fixed Astropod on Twitter. You can listen to us anywhere we get podcasts. We're actually recording the Taurus Decans episode literally next Friday.
Nice. And that's with Pao. That's with Pao, who was on the first episode of the season talking about angular houses. So she definitely shouted out the podcast then too. But yeah, Mo and Pao have the Fixed Astrology podcast. You guys are doing this amazing series on the Decans.
Yeah, and I'm really loving it. And then I recently just did an episode with Max and Zach Powell on Beyonce's birth chart, or what we think is her birth chart. And we actually just dropped that today for the first episode of Max's Mutable Minds podcast. So
nice.
You can check that out.
Exciting.
Yeah, that's just all I'm doing now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you two, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me. It's been so fun.
Thanks for having me, Kirah. It was great.
Thanks for having us.
Talk to you soon.